Hey y'all, I played a lot of games this year and really wanted to say at least something about them. I think it would be useful in understanding how I approach games in these videos, and also it's just fun to do. I don't rank games normally and don't ever plan on it, but it was a fun challenge to genuinely think about the ones I played this year and how I'd rank them. So let's get into it. I'm certainly not the first to say that Guardians of the Galaxy was one of 2021's biggest gaming surprises. After all, the game looked absolutely jank during its premiere that summer, and was shown while we're still recovering from Crystal Dynamics' confused monstrosity that is the Avengers game. I certainly tuned out during its premiere, and I wouldn't have blamed anyone else for doing so. Plus, you could only play as Star-Lord, and that's initially a big turnoff. But then came October, and the gaming world was pleased to discover a fantastically written, gorgeous, and heartfelt game that actually understands what Guardians is all about. The game thankfully exists outside of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, meaning it can tell its own story with tons, and I mean tons, of references to the Guardians comic history. It's also hilarious. For better or worse, the cast never shuts the hell up, and every few minutes is an absolutely golden line that's sure to make you laugh. Honestly, I don't remember a game that has ever made me laugh as much as this one, and it's great that the writers aren't held back by the PG-13 limit of most MCU movies, even if the characters certainly seem inspired by those. The game also knows when to take things seriously and let its story breathe. While things seem relatively tame at first, the stakes are revealed to be pretty high, and I enjoyed the serious parts just as much as the goofy ones. That said, the game never got rid of that gameplay jank from the trailer. It's fun to play at times, sure, and I think if we could play as all the Guardians, this game would have been a nightmare. So in retrospect, playing as Star-Lord alone was a good choice. But jumping feels weird, you're constantly having to reload certain segments for no reason, aiming can be a bit of a pain, and hitboxes seem all over the place, especially in the game's later segments with tons of enemies. The awkward combat animations are sure to take you out of the experience, even if the facial animations during cutscenes are very good. But hey, the game features a ton of variety, with each chapter introducing a unique and generally fun gimmick. I think a few chapters toward the end can drag, but the finale makes everything worthwhile. Honestly, if it weren't for that and the jank gameplay, Guardians would be up much higher on my list. But since so much time is spent with the subpar combat, I have to put it at number 5. I still very much enjoyed getting the platinum though, so take that as you will. I know I'm supposed to play through all the Resident Evil games in order, but I had already played 7 a few years ago before starting this channel, and I do think it's important for me to keep up with big releases. Also, Resident Evil Village looked fucking dope. And it was. While Village was certainly more action-y than 7, it featured an awesome mix of boss fights, enemy types, level design, and set pieces the franchise is known for. As I'm quickly learning, there's nothing quite like a Resident Evil game. They strike a strange tone between ridiculous, serious, and hilarious that no other franchise can compete with. I mean, look at Lady Dimitrescu. What game has a sexy 10-foot-tall vampiric beast that's hellbent on ruining your life no matter the cost? I don't want to talk too much about the game here, as I'll save that for the eventual analysis, but know that Village is a fantastic time once you get past the agonizingly slow and somewhat confusing intro. Also, know that the Platinum Trophy is a little ridiculous, but I think all Resident Evil games are like that. If I could only have one game for the rest of my life, it would be Halo 3. Like many people, Halo 3 was my first foray into online shooters, and I played it alongside the game's top-tier campaign for thousands of hours. With all that praise, one might be surprised to hear that Halo Infinite's multiplayer may be the first I've enjoyed more than 3. By removing armor abilities, adding brilliant new items, and making Sprint all but useless, Halo Infinite feels like the first true sequel to Bungie's best PvP offering. Playing online is just as addictive as it was back then, and changes like the grappling hook add another layer of gameplay nuance rather than throwing off the entire thing like armor abilities and Ordnance did. I've already hit the game's top rank, Onyx, in open multiplayer and have maxed out my battle pass, which should serve as endorsement enough. But as any Halo fan knows, the campaign is just as important as multiplayer, and 343 slightly dropped the ball here. I think the move to an open-world Halo was genius. A Halo ring is a natural fit for the open-world concept. Traversal with the grappling hook feels amazing, and the game isn't full of bloat like a Ubisoft title. It feels appropriately sized, and fighting brutes and elites at any angle I desire feels like what Bungie was intending with the first game, limited only by the tech at the time. One could call Infinite a sort of modern redo of Halo 1. But man, the missions kinda suck. They're fun from a core gameplay perspective, but each one of them feels exactly the same and not a single one lives up to the tightly directed missions of games past. There was a slight callback to that mission type toward the end, but it wasn't enough. And it doesn't help that Infinite is lacking the environmental variety Halo has always thrived in, and it's also missing the weapon variety that made those missions so glorious. But even with these failures, the game is still a blast to play, and the character interactions are great. Chief is weirdly the most vocal he has ever been while still being his traditional stoic self. It's interesting to see him redevelop a relationship with this new Cortana, and 343 did a great job having her bring out certain emotions in Chief that we've never really seen before, at least not in the games. If 343 had nailed every aspect of the campaign, this would have been the #1 spot no doubt, even with the lack of Forge and campaign co-op and all the game's other issues. The most important factor, the gameplay, is damn near perfect, and 343 can only go up from there, right? Right? While I had no problem ranking the previous 3 games, I had a very hard time deciding between the #1 and #2 spots. Ultimately, Returnal ended up as #2 for one key reason: characters. Returnal has one main character, Celine. She's the ultimate badass, taking on a terrifying alien planet all by herself. Not that she has much a choice, since when you die in Returnal, you're sent back to do it all over again. The mechanic actually sets up the story's core conflict and leads to an emotionally charged plot with some striking visuals. That said, much of the tale is up to a person's interpretation rather than told outright to you. While I'm a fan of that, it doesn't make the game the most accessible thing. Also, I love Celine and her interactions with her past or future selves, and her being the game's only main character solidifies the sense of isolation Returnal is going for. The game's combat is the best I've played all year. Developer Housemarque successfully translated their traditionally 2D arcade history into a full-blown 3D experience. It's more demanding than I'd have expected from a first-party PS5 title, but hey, we also got Demon's Souls at launch, so what do I know? I do think Returnal could have been more accessible to other players, and they did recently add a suspend cycle option for players with busy lives, but it's too little too late. The lack of accessibility didn't affect my experience at all, but I think more people would have played this if these issues were addressed at launch. That, and if more people could find a PS5. I published a full analysis of Returnal earlier this year, so you can go check that out if you want to learn more. And if you care about the platinum, I got it when the game still had some item spawn bugs, and it took forever. From what I know though, it should be a lot easier now. What the hell was this game? This shit came out of nowhere. I've never played a Tales game before and was only inspired to pick this up after seeing screenshots of its incredible art style. What I didn't expect was an engaging, tough battle system alongside a fantastic cast of mostly relatable characters and their endless, hilarious interactions. And it's because of these characters that Tales of Arise gained the #1 spot over Returnal. Through my 80 hours spent platinuming the game, I never tired of exploring the world to find all of its hidden items and bosses. The story certainly has a few weak points, but I think it wraps up quite well. Its combat also holds up in the long run with an interesting live-action system that has you assigning various movesets to your face buttons. This makes it easy to execute all sorts of cool combos, with the challenge being in discovering an enemy's weakness. You can also swap between any of the characters whenever you'd like, and you're still keeping them involved no matter what, thanks to its neat callout system. It's definitely a game that deserves its own video down the line, as there's tons of nuance in every aspect that I'd love to talk about one day. There's also a massive amount of endgame content to challenge the combat skills you've honed over the campaign, and it gives an excuse to spend even more time with the characters I've come to love. I know fans were mad about the game's microtransactions, with some claiming progress was quite difficult without spending money, but I didn't notice anything that affected my enjoyment, and I played on hard. But that's a conversation for another time. Overall, I'm more than happy to rank Tales of Arise as my game of the year. Maybe it's because I went in with no expectations, or because I have little experience with the genre, but I loved just about every second I spent with the game. Now for the honorable mentions. Kina, Bridge of Spirits is certainly one of 2021's best looking games, with the action title having come from an animation studio. I enjoyed playing through its surprisingly difficult combat and using the little black creatures, the rot, to solve puzzles and use special moves while fighting. It reminded me a lot of a PS2 adventure game, which is honestly some of the best praise I could give it. That said, it sometimes feels like the game is fighting me, with what feels like a slight delay after every button press, and that made the challenging combat frustrating at times. I also think some of the characters were pretty annoying, and the voice acting was mediocre at best, even if the overall story was fine. Kina could have used some environmental variety as well, as I was often confused as to which areas I had been since they all look so similar. It is still a great game though, and one I aim to come back to and take on its hard mode. This game is hard for me to talk about. I blasted through it in a weekend and remember having fun, but when I think back on it, I get feelings of meh. I think this is because, while the game looks absolutely amazing, Like seriously, it speaks for itself. The game was another Ratchet and Clank game, just a little bit bigger and a lot a bit prettier. The Rift gimmick is nowhere near as cool as we thought it would be. In combat, it's often annoying to use as it just stops the fight for a few seconds and then you're in a slightly different spot. It's like a worse grappling hook, and I stopped using them in combat really early on. Sure, the portal gimmick makes for a lot of awesome set pieces, but does it change the Ratchet and Clank formula on a fundamental level? No. It honestly feels like something they could have done before. That, and the story is kind of fun, but it feels way too much like a children's show. That's the way Ratchet has been going since the movie though, so it's obviously intentional, and to be fair, if I played this as a child, it would have blown my freaking mind. But as my 15th time playing through a Ratchet and Clank game, it's just a fine one and nothing more. I've been trying to play most mid to big tier releases and interesting B tier games since starting this channel so I can keep up to date with trends. And I used that excuse to buy Scarlet Nexus, a game I thought looked interesting but normally would have passed on. And you know what, I had a fun time with it. The characters were fine enough, though not nearly as developed as Guardians or Tales. The story had a few genuinely awesome twists, though I think the ending lets those twists down, and the levels were pretty but disappointingly linear. Where Scarlet Nexus stands out is in its combat, with a flashy system somewhat akin to Devil May Cry or even Tales. But for the few fun developments and layers it does have, the combat loses its shine toward the game's final third, and it just starts feeling repetitive. I also think the game looked higher budget than it ended up being, so a lot of the features didn't get enough development time to stay interesting the entire game. But I'd love to see a sequel with a higher budget. You can tell there's a lot going on here and they just didn't have the time to execute. I love Arcane. Dishonored and Prey were some of my favorite last-gen games, and Deathloop came out, and I played it for 2 days, thought it was a fun and genuinely brilliant story, started really understanding the combat and story mechanics, and then I stopped playing it. I don't know why, I don't know what pulled me off of it, but the point is, it was awesome, and I have a good feeling it's Game of the Year material, but I didn't finish it, so I'll do so this year. I played Mass Effect 1 and 2 religiously as they came out, and 3 as well. But after having done multiple playthroughs of 1 and 2 many times, after 3 I played the hell out of the multiplayer and just kinda stopped. I never played the campaign again. I then played Andromeda for about 10 hours and wanted to die, and sort of forgot about Mass Effect. Then the Legendary Edition came out, and I'm not a middle schooler anymore. I'm an adult, and replaying these games with my current life experience and understanding is awesome. I've absolutely loved replaying the first 2 games, and am about 45 hours into the third, and it might be my favorite one. I'm doing everything I can in the games, and doing it on insanity, and relearning all the lore, and having a great time. Mass Effect makes my imagination go wild like nothing else. Though honestly, in 2, I remember the loyalty missions being more interesting and varied, but a lot of them this time were short, similar, and unmemorable. Also, the facial animations in all 3 games don't exactly hold up, but they're still charming and were great at release. I do think 3's missions make up for the lack of variety in 2's loyalty missions, as these ones are much more fleshed out, and you often get a unique companion to play through just for the set of missions. They're all really fun and are just on this massive scale that feels right with everything going on in the universe, though 2 is still essentially a masterpiece aside from those lackluster loyalty missions. Otherwise, I'm enjoying every second of Mass Effect 3 and its DLC packs, which I had actually never played before, and they're genuinely Mass Effect at its best. Honestly, the only reason this isn't my game of the year is because it's a remaster, and I don't think it should count as a new release, but I've certainly enjoyed it as much as Returnal and Tales. I just view Legendary Edition as a modern, prettier way to play such amazing games, not so much a new release. Well, that's it y'all. Hope you enjoyed this list, and I'd love to see yours in the comments below. I'd love to know what others think of Deathloop, Tales, Returnal, and all sorts of games y'all may have played in 2021. Also, my next video will be on Final Fantasy III, and so far, it's awesome.